For most of my life, I've always felt a oneness with nature. My family enjoyed going to the Arboretum throughout the year, but especially the fall, when the leaves changed colors. Unfortunately, growing up, I lived in a modern suburban area where I was not surrounded by trees. This resulted in my sister and I going to different forest preserves near my house. One of my favorite forest preserves is Waterfall Glen, located in Lamont, Illinois. When I was a junior in high school, my family moved to Downers Grove, where we were completely surrounded by trees. We moved next to a wetland, and since we moved in, I have seen an increase in happiness around my household. Everyone is more uplifted because of all the green around us, and I remember sitting outside and smelling the fresh green grass and trees and feeling completely at ease, something I was not able to experience living by fake trees. It wasn't until quarantine in 2020 that I took advantage of all the new forest preserves around me. Thankfully, where I lived, there are many forest preserves, and my sisters and I enjoyed exploring all the different ones during that time. I loved walking through them, or going off the path and finding hidden streams. One of my favorite things to do in a forest preserve is read, or journal. There is a sense of peace and happiness that I feel when I am leisurely reading outside. When I came to U of I needed to be outside. I am a transfer student who transferred last year during the height of COVID. I lived in a dorm, which is already a lot on one's mental health, but especially when everything was online and there wasn't much to do, I needed to go outside. It became a habit for me to take a long walk every day in the Urbana area, where there are a lot of trees and green grass. Whenever I was feeling panic or stressed, I would go on a walk to clear my head. It really helped me tremendously, and I especially love when it gets a little chilly and I have to wear a coat or sweatshirt when I go on a walk. My friends know how much I enjoy going on my walks, and they recognize how much it helps me. To this day, whenever I need to clear my head or get some fresh air, being outside and going for a walk is the best remedy. Beginning at a very young age, I went to an outdoor overnight camp. For 7 summers in a row, I spent 4 weeks outdoors at this camp. And for my last summer, I chose to stay 8 weeks rather than 4 because I loved it so much. Each day we ate our meals outdoors, had bonfires, and had different outdoor activities of our choosing. My favorite outdoor activities were horseback riding, water skiing, wakeboarding, and outdoor living skills. This time spent in nature every summer from ages 10 to 16 made a large impact on how I chose to cope with different stressors in my life, and greatly influenced my love for nature. Whenever I'm really stressed out or overthinking something, I like to walk outside and play music as I focus on taking deep breaths of fresh air and look at the world around me. Enjoying nature from such a young age really made a difference in how I cope with daily stressors, and has made an impact on my mood and ability to complete tasks throughout the day. I take for granted the abundance of nature that has always been at my fingertips. I was born and raised in northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I've always had access to a lake. I was living on it or had to walk 5 minutes to take a swim. My childhood memories are of my parents, siblings, and I wading through swamp to find the oldest tree, driving for hours in the Keweenaw Peninsula to find the best patch of berries, or being launched off of my older brother's shoulders into cool lake water, followed by competitions to see who could hold their breath the longest. I moved to Northern Michigan University on the shores of Lake Superior, and my life revolving around nature exploded even more. Weeks and weeks were spent finding beaches or camp spots. At the time, it was mostly about gathering with friends, while we all had the intention of being outside. I never stayed too far from the water as I moved from college to my first career job, either. Imagine my shock as I realized the shores of Lake Michigan were mostly private. I began to experience an ounce of what most of the population goes through to have access to nature. After some time, my little sister had moved to Ypsilanti, Michigan, for her first big move away from home. More shock entailed when the pollution of the water in that area affected my sister and her boyfriend. It wasn't safe to eat the fish due to all the microplastic. They eventually moved north to have more access to nature, but the lesson I learned about our water system never left my mind. Eventually, I left my career and went back into the restaurant life I knew and loved. Without my intention, I ended up working for a zero-waste company that used compostable plastic and composted all of its food waste. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was making the best effort I have ever seen. I now own my own business and we use compostable plastic, even though it is triple the price of the other to-go containers. There are a few other establishments in our area making the switch too. My hope is that it will become the norm and less expensive with more companies using it. I currently live back in the same town I grew up in, and most people here don't give a rip about plastic getting into our water system. I talk about it when the timing is right with an ear that will listen. Otherwise, I hope people see my to-go containers and think about what more they can do to help our human-made problems and how they affect the environment all the time. Being outside helps foster my curiosity. I've always loved learning and playing outside in my backyard. And as a little one, it was one of the ways that I really began feeding that love of learning. I used to love picking up worms out of the dirt and would play with all kinds of bugs because I was so fascinated by them, and I wanted to understand more about them. As I got older, I stopped playing with bugs as much, thankfully, and my fascination with the outdoors turned more towards wanting to see and experience all types of terrains, and pushed me to travel to different parts of the world. There's so much nature to explore, and I look forward to finding new ways to utilize nature in my never-ending quest to learn. The changes in seasons always brings along new sights and smells, and with those changes in weather comes feelings and memories. The memories may involve fond recollections of family traditions at certain points in the year, or holidays. For me, the start of fall always gives me a particular feeling of warmth, connected to the Jewish holiday Sukkot. During fall, the Jewish holiday Sukkot is celebrated. The holiday celebrates the harvesting season and commemorates the release of the ancient Jews from slavery. A central part of Sukkot is building a sukkah, a temporary hut structure outside. Typically, the sukkah's top is covered in bamboo sheets, branches, or other materials from the earth. My family, along with many other Jewish families and communities, eat meals in the sukkah, decorate it, and even sleep in it. For me, the holiday strengthens my relationship with nature, family, friends, and community members. Sitting in the sukkah with my family and neighbors for dinner, under a sky full of stars, allows me to reflect on the impact we have had on nature and each other. It is a time to connect with people we love and the aspects of nature we often take for granted, but that provide us with so much. As the season changes from fall to winter, I ask you to reflect on what seasons remind you of certain holidays or family events, and how do these events bring you closer to nature and your relationships. To me, nature is about healing and returning to our roots. Like many, at the beginning of this pandemic, I was not prepared for the implications of being locked indoors for months at a time, separated from the outside world. At first, I enjoyed this, as I tend to enjoy solitude, but it quickly became an anchor for negativity to attach itself to. Whether that be noticing little things you wouldn't before because of being stuck in the same environment, or simply just feeling awful for no reason other than you feel awful. Like a lot of people I've seen and heard from recently, I decided I needed to make a change, and the first thing I attached to was the outdoors. The reason for this is while stuck inside and basically being told I couldn't be outside because of the pandemic, it triggered this borderline anxiety that I needed to be outdoors. So that's what I've started to do, and I've begun my healing process to find a new healthy normal for myself and those around me through the outdoors and hiking. We started doing day hikes around southeastern and northern Wisconsin, and have now planned a trip to the Smokies to go for a 3 or 4 day backpacking trip to really get back into nature. I've realized as I sate my thirst for the outdoors, I'm helping heal my mind from my anxieties and depression that I've built up since the beginning of quarantine. While it may not be the answer for all, I truly believe it's a good starting point for those who may be feeling like their life is missing something. And for me, that was the outdoors and connecting with nature again. I've always found solace in nature. As a teen, whenever I was upset about something, and let's face it, teens are always upset about something, I would follow the creek behind my house upstream and out of our neighborhood. We lived on the edge of the Detroit suburbs, and a short walk upstream would take me into fallow farm fields and woodlots. There was a small hillock there beside a dot of a swamp where I would sit and soak in the soothing sights and sounds of nature. That spot is gone now, but the soothing feelings I get wherever exploring a natural landscape still remains. I encourage everyone to spend time outdoors, whether it's backpacking, car camping, glamping, or just sitting on the park bench. They'll feel a lot better for it. In fact, my daughter Aspen and I started GoneWildWandering.com to do just that, to inspire others to enjoy the outdoors. Through my nature photography and my daughter's original music, we hope to get folks off the couch and back into the woods. Keep wandering. I didn't really discover my passion for the wilderness until I moved to Michigan's Upper Peninsula for school. My friends had introduced me to the remote and rugged UP wilderness, and soon I began venturing out on my own. On one of my first solo hikes to the remote river, I had an experience that would solidify my fascination for the wilderness. I was hiking along the riverbank when I noticed 4 big birds on the opposite bank. As I got closer, I realized they were 3 huge ravens and a bald eagle. Excited but trying to be quiet, I reached to pull out my camera. To my disappointment, the birds were startled and began to fly off. I thought I blew my cover. Then, I saw what really scared the birds off. A coyote walked out into the bank to retrieve whatever dead animal the birds were feasting on. It was the first coyote I'd ever seen in the wild. He picked up the animal and stared at me with piercing eyes. I was able to snap one picture off before he turned around and trotted into the bush. For a kid who's never witnessed such a wild scene or been in contact with such a wild animal before, it had a profound effect on me. Looking back, that was definitely the experience that confirmed this new nature-oriented path that I'm still following. The day before my most recent birthday, my wife asked me to make a wish. I wished to hike a portion of the 50-year trail. As we entered the trailhead, a sign marking the 50-year trail caused a flashback to my youth. In 1966, on a Boy Scout trip, we visited the south rim of the Grand Canyon. The site made a lasting impression on me. I remember hiking to the Colorado River where we camped out for the night, and then we headed back the next day. I was profoundly moved by that experience. Many years later, in retirement, I moved to Utah's Red Rock Country. I visited the north rim of the Grand Canyon on several occasions. Thoughts of hiking to the river again were always present. In 2016, I hiked down the South Kaibab Trail and lodged at the Phantom Ranch. The 50-year difference took a toll on my knees, but the pleasure of being inside this magnificent wonder was beyond description. My eyes swelled with happy tears. I was back with nature. And while my leg muscles ached, my soul was invigorated. 5 years later, on the eve of another birthday, the 50-year trail in the Grand Canyon continues to elevate my spirit all the time. I believe that there are many ways that nature can affect a person. I've had the privilege of being shaped by nature since I was very young, and ever since then I got the opportunity to participate with my mother in gardening. This has helped me and her bond at a young age, and helped me start using nature as a form of de-stressing from school. Nature also was a place that I wanted to explore. In my own backyard, in campus going to the Japan House and Idea Garden, and studying abroad seeing the forest in the middle of Ecuador. Being outside also gave me the opportunity to start being better about my lifestyle as I ate what I planted and ran outside to clear my mind. This allowed me to lose about 100 pounds in 2 to 3 years. Overall, being outside has had many advantages in my life, and I believe that it has been the same situation with many other people. This is why I want to increase the comfortableness of people in nature and the exposureness. I live on a wonderfully nearly year-round creek that is, as one can imagine, teeming with life. Everything from water skippers to birds and flowers abounding. This year I've taken the initiative and begun daily walks along the creek. Not only is the water calming, but there is a buzz of excitement this spring. Everything seems to be coming back either from the south, as with the birds, or back from sleep, as with many of the local plants and insects. Until this year, the creek has been largely left to its own devices aside from the odd observational walk a couple times a year. We really wanted things to recover from previous owners and their habits, and land use decisions before we stepped in to guide nature along a path of coexistence. The main thing we've done is removed blackberries, by hand, and cut down small black walnuts, non-native and very invasive. This year, I started to see the creek not just as a repast from life, but also as a source of abundance and life itself. On my last walk, when I came to a small clearing, I stood for many minutes watching the water flow past me. I finally decided to do it. I took off my boots and socks and carefully climbed down into the numbingly cold waters. My feet were instantly chilled, and then numbed by the recent ice melt, which was a blessing as there was an abundance of rocks with a varying degree of sharpness to them. I walked out to the deepest part of the stretch of creek, about mid-shin height, and stood there letting the cold but refreshing water wash over my feet and part of my legs. I felt the life teeming all around me. At once, I felt a sense of overwhelming happiness and joy. It is great to be alive. It is great to notice the wonders of our own backyard. I invite all who read this to spend a second, a minute, an hour, a day in their own backyard, and doing whatever it is they are called to do, take a moment to pause and listen and feel all the life that's around you. We live in a big world full of it. I've always been a lover of nature. We moved to Oregon over 40 years ago. With our hiking and mountain climbing, kayaking and soaking in the hot springs, camping and wildlife, my paradise had been found. COVID-19 and home sheltering made me wonder how I might nurture my love of the outdoors. I am privileged to own a home with the possibility of endless gardening. With my raised beds instead of lawn, my dwarf fruit trees and my surroundings of huge maples, spruce, and blossoming cherry, the pandemic has given me the gift of time to closely observe my own habitat. I have witnessed crows mating on the top peak of my small greenhouse roof. With plenty of planted red flowers, I watch the filtering dance of my early morning of twilight hummingbirds. I have never stared so hard at the miniature wings before and wondered at how amazing their tiny little lives are. I've also stared at the sheer wings of a fly and enjoyed the close watching of bees sipping the nectar of my flowers. Usually I wait until mid-morning to have my cup of coffee. Then I sit on my cedar front deck and simply sip and observe how the wind tussles and sways my raspberry bushes and fig tree leaves, or gives momentum to the winged glide of an eagle. The Oregon white-clouded, swirled blue skies are the most beautiful in the world. The sunsets bring oohs and ahs. Full moons rise above and between the trees and bathe the whole neighborhood in light. As I noted this week, however, my nature kingdom can also be harsh. On my front deck as usual, I hear loud, traumatic shrieking. I look across the street and see several crows attacking a juvenile flicker. The mother flicker is crying and trying to save her young. I run across the road and try to chase the crows away, and the baby is alive and makes its way over to the corner of the neighbor's house. The crows return, however, and the young flicker is killed. I realize later in talking with my naturalist neighbor that the crows are defending their territory and a nest. Still, I'm stunned and heartbroken. Life can be terribly difficult and stunningly beautiful at the same time. And COVID-19 has been devastating with its losses both in deaths of persons and livelihoods, but it has given us gifts of time for contemplation and appreciation of nature's always simple presence.